In a recent interview with Fight Hype, Floyd MAYWEATHER has stated that racism still exists in sports in general, but more often than not in boxing. And in an interview, I will say this. Look at it for yourself. Many articles out there are running the first couple of sentences that Floyd Mayweather referred to, specifically the moments with Ronda Rousey and McGregor, because it's going to get the clicks. I get it. We understand this. Okay. But, I mean, we, more often than not, will jump on the bandwagon. We'll take it into account, but we are open in our thoughts about Floyd Mayweather outside the ring. Not going to get into it. We've talked about this a million times. But in this situation, read the full article. Understand what he's saying as a whole, and don't just take the fact of the headline saying Mayweather says that racism is why people don't like him. You need to read the full article. So the interview, said. So, Jason, you've got some points in this to kind of mention out.
Yeah,
right?
So there's a lot of reading for this, and I'm going to do this as fast as I can, but also within context, and that's why you'll see the quote card. So we're going to start with the first of 5, and I'll try to get through these. And as you made the good point, we'll leave the link in the description below. It's a fantastic interview. I'll definitely give Ben Thompson credit, that's the guy who wrote it and did the interview, and I'll give Mayweather a lot of credit for offering a lot of insight. So Ben Thompson asked Floyd, this was the first question, with 2015 coming in, I wanted to check in with you to get your take on the current state of boxing. And he mentions his relationship with Showtime, with HBO, which he did have a good relationship with. Then he mentions his relationship with Showtime, which he has now because they gave him the richest contract in boxing history. He does go after guys like Jim Lampley, a guy that doesn't know a right hook from a left hook, never fought one amateur fight in his life. When I was with the company HBO, he praised me, but when I made smart business decisions for me and my family, what did I get? Scrutiny. Once again, it's crazy. This guy, Jim Lampley, has never thrown one punch in his life, but he's got his own boxing show, and he's making up his own lists.
I don't agree with that. I mean, I've talked about it.
But I want to go, let's get through all of these, then we can rehash over. So then the next question, same question. He continues to say that even though the guys that are ranked #1 pound for pound right now, like Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, you can't argue about that. But Andre Ward loses a fight and he has to be #2. I mean, he wins his fights not in good fashion, but in great fashion, and they have him at #4. I truly believe that racism still exists in the sport of boxing. So that's the first part of the interview. And we'll talk about that for a second because Jim Lampley does know boxing. And he also talks about how Max Kellerman's never thrown a punch in his life and he doesn't know boxing. And that's a common phrasing in the sport of boxing, that those inner crowds, those inner rings of boxing, the ones who fight, manage, and train, right? They do feel like they're the only ones who know the sport. And here's what I'll give them credit for. They know it way more than anybody like me or you sitting here do. But we also are fans of the sport and we consume it, and without us, there is no money.
No doubt. And I say this
so when that's on the line, we have our opinions. We want to share them. No, I don't know everything about the sport of boxing. I avidly watch it. I offer my opinions, and you guys comment below with what you think. And that's totally fine. But in no other sport does it come up more that if you've never thrown a punch, you shouldn't be able to talk about boxing. Bill Simmons has barely ever shot a basketball, and he knows more about basketball than almost every analyst on TV.
Yep.
He's written a 50,000-word book twice regarding it. And the same goes for the NFL. There's guys like Michael Lewis who write for the New York Times who have probably never thrown a baseball in his life, and he took on Moneyball and wrote a best-selling book. Just because you don't do it doesn't mean you can't talk about it.
Yeah.
So that's the only criticism I have for Floyd in that article.
Yeah, and it's the same way with every other sport. If you're going to have to, sport and everything else in entertainment, every film critic, of course they went to film school. I mean, you can study up basketball, but if they weren't actors, or if they weren't directors, does that mean they can't have an opinion on the movie? We're the ones that are buying and selling the tickets.
100%.
We're the ones that are going to watch these sports. And this is the one part of this article that I will condemn, and I've condemned many other sportsmen talking about this. John Terry with the World of Football condemning a player because he didn't win the amount of trophies that John Terry did for basically throwing some insults at him. Not discrediting him, but some insults about his performances. Not even insults, just criticisms, to be honest. And he was actually very swift in making some harsh comments about him. And I don't agree with what Floyd Mayweather is saying on this. Yes, someone can have their discrepancies towards you, but this sport and a lot of other sports are brought in by the fans. You mentioned that point, Jason. So just because we're not world-renowned champions or we're not the best fighter of all time, if you're going to take that stance, and how can anyone, Floyd, criticize you because you're in a league of your own when it comes to your record. You're in a league of your own. So someone, if, for instance, Muhammad Ali was to criticize you just because his record wasn't as impeccable as yours and he Like you've never lost. Does that mean he doesn't have the perspective towards you? I understand it's a little bit more far-fetched, but everyone should have their opinion. And if you study the sport and it is your life and you make it your career, you have every single right to criticize someone within the boundaries that you're given in your position. But let's move forward.
Pound it. Nice job. Moving forward, we have a few more because I want to get to the Conor McGregor, and I know this is going to go a little bit longer, everybody. So the next question, he said, obviously you're probably the best example of a successful African-American in the sport, so I'm not sure people are really going to understand what you mean when you say that racism still exists. Can you elaborate on that or give an example of what you mean? Ben Thompson, nice work. That is the type of question that needed to be asked. That's also the question that is being stripped from every single source I've read this story from. That's important to note because it wasn't just like Floyd said, racism still exists, it's because of Conor McGregor. That's not how this works. So back to that real quick. We can skip that part of it and move to two more when we get to the Ronda Rousey. Because he talks about all the great African-American fighters there are right now, which there are, Kell Brook and Keith Thurman, and I agree with him.
Yeah.
But if you look at things like this, Ronda Rousey, you know, I think she fought somewhere like 11 or 12 fights, which is not a bad thing. Layla Ali went undefeated and was dominating too. After Ronda fought, I think, 9, 10, 11 fights, it didn't even take that long. She got all types of endorsements, movies, and everything. Layla Ali did the same thing in better fashion. Continues, I think. In better fashion than Ronda Rousey, and she's a good-looking woman. She put it on. Layla Ali is a drop-dead gorgeous woman. I mean, naturally beautiful woman and can kick ass. We never heard them.
Ronda.
The media saying when she said I think somewhere around 10, 11 fights that she was the baddest woman on the planet. So that's more of why he thinks the racism still exists in sports. I mean, in boxing, because Layla dominated the sport of boxing. Ronda Rousey dominated the sport of UFC. Layla's black. Ronda's white. Ronda got all the endorsement. Ronda got all the movies. Layla. Maybe we don't know if she was offered any of it. I don't know if she was offered any of it, but wasn't in that spotlight. That also could be because UFC is becoming bigger than boxing.
It is way more exciting. Her fights are, Ronda Rousey's fights in her prime were over in an instant. She was exciting because she was demolishing her opponents in such emphatic fashion. I'm not saying Layla Ali was not as well, but as it comes to it, we're all under the same understanding. Let's not sugarcoat it that UFC is growing faster than boxing is, and it makes sense.
And by the way, I agree with Floyd in a lot of what he is saying.
No, there is no doubt, and I want to make that disclosure as well, that we would be naive if we sat here and said that racism is maybe not a factor in why people do not like Floyd Mayweather, maybe why people would view Ronda Rousey instead of Layla Ali. We are in a racist culture. No one here is under the assumption that racism will not play a factor in this.
Floyd makes the point that I truly believe that racism still exists in the sport of boxing. With the greater point is, I truly believe that racism still exists in our own country.
Of course it does.
So it goes bigger than that. But I don't want to get into that topic too much because I also want to throw to a little bit of a conflicting viewpoint, and I thought he echoed sentiments in a very similar vein, and by that I mean he articulated it well. Bruce Buffer, who does the Let's Get Ready to Rumble, was asked by TMZ about this same topic.
Do you see these comments by Floyd Mayweather?
No, which one's happening?
About Conor McGregor. Well, what he's basically saying is that when he was the loudmouth, the cocky guy, everyone hated him for it.
Yeah.
And that when Conor does it, it proves, and now he's like the most popular guy going into 2016. He says it proves that racism still exists.
I honestly, with all respect to Floyd, and I mean that, Floyd, I've known him for a lot of years, but this whole race card thing, it gets a little boring after a while. The bottom line is that perception is reality, and people perceive you the way they want to perceive you, and this involves whether you're black, white, red, yellow, or purple, and that's just the way I look at it, but to constantly play the racism, we need to play racism down in this country. We have enough issues going on rather than throwing more gasoline on the fire. Why not look at it like, hey, Conor McGregor's saying what he's saying, he's backing up everything he's saying, people are listening to what he's saying, and when Floyd talks, people listen to Floyd too. But they're two different people from two different fighting sports, and they'll be perceived the way they want to be perceived by the public masses.
So
it's as simple as that.
There's nothing to that. Like, I mean,
not as far as
I'm concerned. As he finished off, he's right too.
Okay,
you guys are both right.
So, and this is where I will tread lightly as well, because we can only try to understand and try to articulate, but unless you're a subject of that form of racism, there's no doubt in my mind that Floyd Mayweather is viewed, I would say, in a negative light by many people in the world because of his race. That is a horrible fact that we are living in, especially in this country. I've came in and I can see it. It's so prominent in this country, right? But what I want to talk about is the earlier points in the quotes and then leading into Conor McGregor. He didn't just, he related it throughout boxing as well, talking about Gennady Golovkin and how he's getting so much praise about he's fearless, and he said that there's other African-American boxers that had the same thing, but they weren't taken as serious, or if not, brought as much attention around it as Gennady Golovkin. It could be an issue around their race. I'm not saying, but from a media standpoint, I think it's more to the point that Gennady Golovkin's an exciting fighter, and it's someone that boxing needs at the moment. They need an exciting fighter with that. When I'm talking about Conor McGregor and how Conor McGregor is cocky and the way that he's holding himself right now, very similar to how Floyd would do it within the boxing world, do I think that race might play a factor in it? Who knows? Some people out there are so, I would say, short-sighted that they would view it like that. Do I think that it's something different in the fact that Floyd Mayweather is just not as much of a likeable guy as Conor McGregor? I think it's more so with that. I'm going to defend Floyd in a lot of the things that are said there. I think that he, again, in this example, TMZ, gave them a very short part of that story, and they got a response that was actually pretty well articulated but can be taken out of context because they didn't give him the full story. They didn't tell him everything else. But Conor McGregor has not, and I hate to bring this up again, he hasn't been found guilty of over 5 different types of domestic abuse and battery and sentenced to jail. That is going to affect how people view you.
Perceive
That is, or perceive you, or view you in that light. You're going to be held negatively for that. There's so many, look at John Jones. Do we think that he's disliked more so now in the industry because of his race, or because he had a hit and run and left a pregnant woman injured, came back, grabbed cash, and then left? That's why people dislike John Jones, if they are. There are people that might view him differently because of his race, and those people are ignorant, and I wouldn't even give them the time of the day. But people have within their every right to view John Jones negatively for his actions, just as people have it within their right to view Floyd Mayweather negatively. Conor McGregor, to my knowledge at the moment, doesn't have that on his record. He's cocky, he's loudmouth, he's everything that the UFC needs, and there's tons of people out there that I've experienced this firsthand that dislike Conor McGregor because he's from Ireland. And there's tons of people that love him because he's from Ireland. There's fans who are still holding on to some sectarian views, and you've seen all the problems what happened when Conor McGregor read out loud, "Fuck the Queen." There was many people that hated him for that. And that's something that he brought negatively to himself, and people are within their right to dislike him for that. It is all about perspective. But if I was to go on record and say, do I think that people would dislike dislike Mayweather in comparison to McGregor? Is it to do with race, or is it to do with his persona and how he's carried himself? I would have to go with the latter.
I agree with that. I'd agree with that. Here's what I asked the audience. If you've gotten to this point in the video and you want to comment below, which obviously you can comment below, but if you've gotten to this point, make a note that you've gotten to this point in the video and make a comment, and we'll be happy to get into a debate with you, because some, and I don't criticize anybody for this, come in, watch a certain part of it, write their thoughts, which is totally fine. All comments are great. We love reading all of them. But it's tough to get into some discussions with this just because if you see only parts of this clip, if you've seen it all the way through and you've read the entire Floyd Mayweather interview in the description below, write a comment, let us know about it, and we'll all chime in with you guys and we'd like to get into a good debate, at least a good discussion, a healthy discussion, because you should be able to talk about these things. We live in the 21st century, I believe, right? We're in
as far as the last time I checked, yeah.
It's 2015, it's 2016 now, geez. But we can have these conversations, and we want to. So, do you agree with Floyd Mayweather? Do you think racism still exists in boxing? Do you agree with Bruce Buffer? Do you think perception is reality? And do you agree with everything from Conor McGregor to Layla Ali to all the proponents that were mentioned throughout this clip? Like, favorite, subscribe. We hope you do. Make sure to stick around. We'll be covering, of course, a lot more Mayweather, a lot more McGregor, a lot more Layla Ali, a lot more
Ronda Rousey.
I'll say Bruce Buffer.
Well, we will.
We like Bruce Buffer. Follow Francis at Francis_Maxwell, myself at JasonRubin91. Check over at TYT Sports Twitter, and watch out for some Super Bowl call-outs, because it's coming, baby. We're going to have a great Super Bowl party for you guys all lined up. We'll see you next time.